Hey everyone, have you ever looked at that organic label at the store and thought is this really organic?
Yeah,
Yeah, dude.
like
Question, right?
especially these days with the USDA kind of tightening up the rules around organic certifications
Right.
with all this stuff about SOE.
Right, exactly. So that's actually what we're going to be diving into today. The USDA's crackdown on organic food fraud and this company VeriPura that's using some pretty wild technology to try to make sure organic actually means something.
It's super interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And timely, too, with these new SOE regulations.
Yeah, what is SOE?
SOE stands for Strengthening Organic Enforcement. So
Okay.
basically, imagine the USDA is like the referee in the organic food world, and they're making sure everyone's playing by the rules. And these SOE regulations are like their new rule book designed to, eliminate fake organic certifications and track imports more carefully, and really just guarantee that when you see that organic label, you're getting what you pay for.
Got it. So no more shady organic shenanigans.
Hopefully not. That's the goal.
Okay, good. I like that. But how does VeriPura fit into all of this?
That's where it gets really cool. So VeriPura is like a business-to-business marketplace, but it's built on blockchain technology.
Wait, blockchain?
Yeah.
Isn't that Bitcoin stuff? What does that have to do with my organic kale?
That's the thing. Blockchain is so much more than just cryptocurrency. In this case, it's all about transparency. So imagine like a giant unhackable spreadsheet in the cloud that tracks like every organic banana from the farm it grew on to the truck that delivered it. That's essentially what blockchain does for VeriPura.
Okay. I think I'm starting to see why this is kind of a big deal. But the USDA's SOE rules, aren't they trying to fix specific problems, not just a general sense of keep things honest?
You're exactly right. They are.
Yeah.
So let's break down a few of those SOE pain points and how VeriPura is like stepping in with the solution. So one big one is fraudulent certifications. You wouldn't believe how easy it used to be for companies to just slap an organic label on something that wasn't the real deal.
Ugh, that's so frustrating.
Right. Totally defeats the purpose. So the SOE is like really tightening up those certification processes, making them way more rigorous. And this is where VeriPura comes in. Instead of relying on like periodic inspections, which are kind of like having a night watchman who only checks in every once in a while, VeriPura uses these things called smart contracts on the blockchain to enable continuous monitoring.
Okay, wait, hold on. Smart contracts. Now I'm picturing lawyers negotiating deals for organic carrots.
Not quite. Think of a smart contract more like a vending machine. You put in the right input, in this case like a valid organic certificate, and then the output happens automatically. Maybe a shipment gets approved to move to the next step in the supply chain. So it's making sure that these certifications are being checked and verified all the time, not just once in a blue moon.
So it's like having a 24/7 security camera system instead of that night watchman.
Exactly. And that's a huge deal for transparency and accountability in the organic world.
Hmm.
It really cuts down on the risk of those fake certifications slipping through.
That's impressive. Okay, I'm with you on the continuous monitoring thing.
Yeah.
But what about those imports? I feel like I've heard that's a real headache when it comes to verifying organic standards.
Absolutely. Imports are definitely another area where the SOE is trying to improve oversight. There have been cases of imported food being labeled organic when it really wasn't,
Yeah.
which is a huge betrayal of consumer trust.
Yeah, for sure. So how does VeriPura tackle that?
Remember those smart contracts?
Yeah.
Well, they can also be used to verify NOP import certificates.
Okay, more acronyms. NOP import certificates. Can you break that one down for us?
Of course. Think of these certificates like passports for organic food coming into the U.S. They're proof that those products meet U.S. organic standards. With VeriPura, these certificates are created and verified digitally on the blockchain. So it's tamper-proof.
So no more forged passports for organic imports.
Exactly. You'd be like trying to change a grade on your permanent record. It's pretty much impossible.
Okay, so this is all starting to come together for me. But there's another big issue the SOE is taking on, right? Something about a lack of transparency through that whole process.
Yeah, the SOE wants to see continuous monitoring of how these organic products are moving from the farm to the table. Not just spot checks.
And how does VeriPura help with that?
Well, this is where that unhackable spreadsheet analogy comes in handy. Every time an organic product changes hands from the farmer to the processor to the distributor, it's recorded on VeriPura's blockchain platform.
So it's like a digital breadcrumb trail showing exactly where a product came from and how it was handled.
Precisely. And that level of transparency not only helps prevent fraud, but it also enables faster tracing of products if there's ever like a recall.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's kind of a win-win for both safety and like consumer confidence.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm genuinely curious about this. Have you seen any cases where Veripura actually caught someone trying to cheat the system?
Well, I can't really talk about specific cases because of confidentiality, but I can say that the system's real-time alerts have flagged inconsistencies that warranted further investigation.
So like a digital detective on the case 24/7.
Pretty much.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. But wouldn't that be super expensive for companies to implement? I mean, hiring a 24/7 digital detective can't be cheap.
That's a valid concern. You're right. Implementing a system like VeriPura does require like an initial investment, but it's really important to consider the long-term benefits. Think about the costs associated with a product recall if there's fraud or contamination.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Those costs can be astronomical, plus the damage to a company's reputation.
Exactly. So by preventing that fraud and ensuring compliance, VeriPura could actually save companies money in the long run. Plus, as the technology matures and becomes more widely adopted, the costs are likely to come down.
Okay, so we're talking increased transparency, better fraud prevention, and potentially even cost savings. I'm starting to think this blockchain thing is more than just a buzzword.
It's definitely way more than hype. And what's really exciting is that this kind of technology could be applied to so many other industries beyond just organic food. Imagine a world where you could trace the origins of like your clothes, your electronics, virtually anything you buy.
Whoa, hold on. Before we get too carried away with like revolutionizing the entire shopping experience, let's bring it back to the here and now.
Yeah.
How does Veripura actually work in a practical sense? Like, is it user-friendly for the people on the ground, the farmers and importers?
That's a great question, and it's really crucial. So VeriPure is actually designed to be very user-friendly. Even for folks who aren't necessarily tech-savvy, you can think of it kind of like online banking. You don't need to be like a coding whiz to use it. VeriPura provides a really simple interface where users can upload their documents and track shipments and manage their certifications.
So no more drowning in paperwork.
Exactly.
That's got to be a huge relief for those folks who are dealing with like mountains of forms and audits.
Absolutely. And it's not just about like simplifying the process. It's
Yeah.
also about giving everyone involved more control over their own data.
Okay, that's cool. I'm intrigued, but I'm also a little skeptical. Is this just like a fancy solution looking for a problem? Are companies actually using this, or is it mostly theoretical?
That's a good question, and it's where it starts to get really interesting. Because VeriPura is still relatively new, but it's already being used by a growing number of companies.
Hmm.
One of their early partners is this large importer of organic fruits and vegetables, and they were just drowning in paperwork trying to keep up with all the SOE's documentation requirements, and they found that VeriPura really streamlined their whole process.
So it's not just some futuristic concept, it's actually making a difference for businesses right now.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
Yeah.
And the benefits go beyond just compliance too. This importer is also using VeriPura to like build stronger relationships with their customers. They can now share really detailed, verified information about like the origin and the journey of their produce.
So instead of just seeing like organic bananas on a sticker, I could potentially scan a code and see exactly which farm in Costa Rica grew those bananas and when they were harvested and how they got to my grocery store.
Yeah, exactly. That's that next level transparency. It's giving consumers more confidence in what they're buying. And it's not just about appealing to eco-conscious shoppers. It's a powerful tool for building brand loyalty and trust.
Okay. So we've got importers on board. What about the folks at the beginning of the supply chain? The farmers, I imagine they're not all like sitting around coding blockchain contracts in their overalls.
That's a fair point. Farmers are the backbone of this whole industry, and VeriPura really gets that. They're working hard to make their platform accessible and beneficial for farmers of all sizes.
How are they doing that?
Well, they're partnering with organic certification bodies to integrate their systems, and that makes it way easier for farmers to share their data and prove their organic practices.
Yeah.
Imagine a small organic coffee farm in Costa Rica.
Hmm.
They've been meticulously following these organic practices for generations, but proving that to buyers and regulators has always been a nightmare.
Yeah, I've heard horror stories about those audits.
Boxes and boxes of paperwork,
Ugh.
right? But with VeriPura, a lot of that burden is lifted. So imagine that same farmer being able to upload their organic certifications and track their harvest and communicate directly with buyers, all through a simple app on their phone.
That's a game changer for sure.
Right. It saves them time. reduces their cost, and gives them way more control over their own business.
That's a pretty amazing. It almost sounds too good to be true. Are there any downsides or potential risks with this kind of technology?
Well, it's important to remember that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be misused. While VeriPura has some really robust security features, no system is completely foolproof. So it's crucial for everyone involved to really prioritize data security and follow best practices.
So it's not a silver bullet.
There's no silver bullet with technology.
Yeah.
But the benefits of increased transparency and accountability really far outweigh the risks, especially when those risks are managed responsibly.
Okay, so we've covered the benefits, the challenges, the key players involved. I'm curious about the bigger picture now. Where do you see this technology going in the future? Is this just about organic food, or is there like a wider application here?
That's where it gets really exciting. What VeriPure is doing for organic food could completely revolutionize so many other industries. Think about fair trade coffee or sustainably sourced seafood, even conflict-free diamonds. Anywhere that transparency and ethical sourcing are important, blockchain can play a huge role.
Whoa, so this could be the start of like a whole new era of ethical consumerism. Consumers could trace the entire journey of the products they buy, from like the raw materials to the finished good.
Exactly. Imagine being able to scan a code on your coffee cup and see the faces of the farmers who grew those beans, or track the journey of your new smartphone from the mine to the factory to your hand.
That's mind-blowing. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It's closer than you think. And it's not just about knowing where your stuff comes from. This kind of transparency can really empower consumers to make more informed and ethical choices.
So instead of just blindly trusting labels and brands, we could have like real evidence to back up those claims.
Precisely. And that kind of power shift could really change the way businesses operate. Companies would be held accountable for their actions, not just their marketing slogans. It's about building trust in a way that's never been possible before.
Okay, I'll admit I'm getting a little swept up in the possibilities here, but let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. For like the everyday person who's just trying to navigate the grocery store, what are the key takeaways from all of this?
I think there are a few really important things to remember. First, the USDA is serious about cracking down on organic fraud with these SOE regulations. They're stepping up their game to protect consumers and ensure the integrity of that organic label. Second, technology like blockchain is playing a really vital role in making those regulations work, making sure that organic food is truly organic. And third, this kind of technology has the potential to transform how we think about food labels and trust in general.
So maybe in a few years when we're standing in that grocery aisle, that organic label will come with a whole new level of assurance, thanks to the magic of blockchain.
That's definitely a likely scenario. And it's a good reminder that even something as simple as a food label is actually connected to a really vast and complex web of technology and regulations and human choices.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to take a little break and reflect on everything we've discussed so far. When we come back, we'll explore some of the broader implications of this technology and what it all means for the future of our food system. Stay tuned. All right, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into VeriPura and this whole world of blockchain verified organic food.
Yeah, and as we kind of wrap up here, I think it's really important to touch on something we mentioned earlier, the sheer scope of this technology.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've talked a lot about organic food, but VeriPure is really just one example of how blockchain is like changing the game for supply chain transparency.
Right. It's like we were peeking through a keyhole and now suddenly this giant door is swinging open and there's this massive landscape of possibilities.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away with all the shiny new tech, I think we should take a minute to think about the potential downsides. Every innovation comes with its challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think one of the biggest challenges with any like data-driven system is the potential for bias. If the information that's being fed into the system is incomplete or skewed, it can actually end up perpetuating existing inequalities.
So like if VeriPura is mostly working with large-scale organic farms, the data wouldn't really represent the diversity of the whole organic sector,
Yeah.
including all the smaller farms out there.
Exactly. It's crucial to make sure that everyone has equal access to this technology and that the data reflects the full spectrum of the industry. Otherwise, you just end up creating a system that benefits those who are already ahead and further marginalizes smaller players. That's a really important point. And it makes me think about another potential issue, the whole question of data ownership and control. Who ultimately owns the data on a blockchain platform and how is it being used?
Those are such great questions, and honestly, there are no easy answers. It's a super complex landscape with ethical and legal ramifications.
Hmm.
Imagine a scenario where a farmer's data, the data they've meticulously collected and verified on a platform like VeriPura, is then used for marketing purposes, or even sold to third parties without their consent.
Yeah, that would feel like such a violation.
Totally.
If someone's profiting off their hard work without their permission.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have really clear guidelines and regulations around data privacy and ownership in this whole space. Blockchain technology itself is incredibly secure, but it's the human element, the way we use and govern the data, that really determines the ethical implications.
So it's not just about building the tech, it's about building that trust and accountability that goes along with it.
100%.
We need to make sure that this powerful tool is being used responsibly and ethically to create a more equitable and sustainable food system. Really a more equitable world in general.
Couldn't agree more. It's about empowering consumers, supporting ethical businesses, and ultimately creating a system that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Okay, well, we've covered a ton of ground today. From the nitty-gritty details of USDA regulations to the mind-blowing potential of blockchain. I think we've really explored this complex world behind that simple organic label. But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question.
Okay, I'm ready.
What if systems like Veripura become the norm? Could it fundamentally change our relationship with food and the trust we place in brands and labels? Will we become more informed and empowered consumers armed with data and transparency? Or will we become more reliant on technology to make decisions for us? It's a question worth thinking about and one that will probably shape the future of our food system.
That's such a great question, and it really gets to the heart of this whole conversation. Ultimately, technology is a tool, and it's up to us as consumers, as citizens, to decide how we're going to use that tool. Do we use it to create a more just and sustainable world, or do we let it kind of make those existing inequalities even worse? It's a choice we all have to make.
Well said. And on that note, we want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Veripura and blockchain-verified organic food. We hope this episode has given you a new perspective on the food you eat and the choices you make. Keep those curious minds engaged. And remember, every time you see that organic label, there's a whole world of innovation and ethical considerations behind it. Until next time, happy eating.